Well, you've probably heard of end-stage renal disease, a condition so costly and severe that Medicare steps in to pay for it, even for younger patients. But until recently, there's been very little attention given to the early stages of kidney disease, even though it is possible to identify the condition early, slow down progression, and avoid crashing into dialysis. I'm David Williams, president of strategy consulting firm Health Business Group and host of the HealthBiz podcast, a weekly show where I interview top healthcare entrepreneurs about their lives and careers. My guest today is Eric Reimer, CEO of Healthmap Solutions, a company that's helping those early stage patients improve their health, which has all sorts of beneficial effects for providers, payers, family members, and society at large. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you for having me.
You should hear how I introduce a guest when I'm really excited about what they're doing.
Yeah.
But I think it does. It really does show. I mean, it's such a central issue that you're working on. I'm really looking forward to talking about it.
Well, I, again, appreciate you having me in.
So, Eric, let's talk a little bit about how you got to this point, and maybe just starting way back with kind of your background and upbringing. Any childhood influences that stick with you in your work today.
Well, my biggest influencers were my parents. Hopefully, many people feel that way. I grew up in New Jersey, very middle class, maybe lower end middle class, but we didn't think that way. We thought we had the lifestyle that was perfect. I mean, I think it was a generation, my parents' generation, their parents had been in, lived through World War II and the Great Depression, and the idea that there were a bunch of folks coming from Brooklyn and Queens, from apartments to a place where they could have a house and a backyard, and that was the dream. So it was a great it was a great place to grow up, and it was one of those neighborhoods that had 30 kids on the block, and everybody got together and played basketball or football or baseball that day, and we didn't need a whole lot. We were just pretty happy. My parents were taught me to work very hard. My mother was a teacher, special needs teacher. She was very dedicated to her kids. And then she was always, trying. She hustled. She was a tutor when she wasn't teaching. She worked in religious school when she wasn't teaching. She worked in preschool. And so that work ethic I saw. My father, commuted into New York City every day, and he worked long hours, and he was working in textiles, and he was proud of what he did. And they kind of taught me, whatever you're doing, be proud of what you're doing, work hard at it. And I think that work ethic made a big difference. It was completely expected, and I was happy to work odd jobs through my childhood. I shoveled driveways when the snow came down. We rooted for the snow so we could make a few bucks. We raked leaves. We mowed lawns. And when I was 15, I worked at Burger King. I worked at Great Adventure. I worked as a teller. And in every one of those instances, you learn a little bit about the business. And it's interesting what kind of insights you can have being on the front line of a business. You also learn that people work really hard at those jobs, and you have to treat people with respect. And my parents, again, were always those people that, they'd walk into a place like that and everybody deserved their respect. And that had a big impact on me. I think they prioritized family and health and happiness. And it wasn't about, getting the next thing. We just weren't raised that way, and it had a big impact. And I think beyond that, I played a lot of basketball. I think being a team sport guy, I played a bunch of sports, but got to be the captain of my basketball team in high school. And, we weren't great, but we were competitive, and learning to kind of mesh as a team and lead people, I think was a good early influence. So both of those, I think would both the community, the parents, and then playing sports early, I think was just a way to, again, learn about leadership and working with others.
Oh, good. And what did you do for schooling?
Went off to Washington University in St. Louis, then majored in economics and minored in business. Ended up going to Wharton Business School, both great schools and both great experiences for me.
Sounds good. And then I think you worked sometime soon after that anyway at Boston Consulting Group, where we overlapped. And I think they'd seen you in the hall once or twice. But I think the next time I saw you, I remember sitting in a conference room in Avon, Connecticut, I think when we were at Internet Healthcare Group. That's my earliest recollection of
That's
sitting
right.
down with you.
I think we met about 25 years ago. Yeah, I was in the New York office, and great people. What I think about when I was at BCG, I remember thinking places like Wharton, you just keep funneling up and you keep getting great people. But there were still people at Wharton, I'd say, I'm not sure how they got there. At BCG, I felt like everybody consistently was bright, hardworking, energetic, strategic. It was just really good people. Enjoyed the experience. One of the things I'd say I took out of BCG was we always underestimated how hard it was to actually implement our suggestions.
Yeah.
And I remember I was on one case where we were doing some re-engineering work, and I was making a recommendation, and the partner came in and looked at my material, and he said, well, you don't need to make recommendations, just highlight the pros and cons of both. That's ultimately their decision. And I remember thinking, I want to make those decisions down the line. I think it makes more sense for me to go into industry, and but the foundations and the analytics from a place like BCG definitely stay with you.
Yeah, it's always a place I'm happy to tell people, where I worked before. Some of my colleagues, they may hesitate, and I always say Boston Consulting Group, and people may have had whatever impression of it, but I had the same experience you did. All the folks there were great, and have continued to work with a number of them, even though not at that company, haven't been there for 20 years.
Right.
So then what was your kind of arc after that, as you sort of went from saying great recommendations, but you want to be making those decisions, making it happen?
So I thought I wanted to go into healthcare. I had been a healthcare management major at Wharton. I'd done a lot of healthcare consulting before Wharton. And I ended up thinking about going to Prudential and getting an opportunity to go to Prudential Healthcare, which at the time was, I think, the 7th largest insurance company. And people don't remember it that way,
Yeah.
but it was a mighty insurance company, but inside of the big Prudential. And so Prudential was trying to spin it off. The business was losing a lot of money. Prudential wanted to go public themselves, and healthcare was, again, people don't always remember this. Healthcare then was considered toxic.
Yeah.
Oxford had just announced that they never know if they ever made $1. United had just taken a giant write down, and Prudential's IPO was really hanging on the ability to sell this business. I was totally unsuspecting in all that. I thought it would be interesting to be in healthcare in an insurance company in New Jersey, where I grew up. My wife was from as well. And here was a good opportunity. So I go on to be to report to the president of Prudential, Renee Learer, and Steve Schulman was the CEO at the time. And about a month in, I'm thinking, this is a great place. I'm going to tell my boss how I want to buy a house now instead of living in New York City, and he's going to love it. He's going to think I'm really dedicated. And he pulls me in and he closed the door and says, you do not want to buy a house in New Jersey. I said, why? He said, we're losing $1 billion a year, Eric. We could be out of business. We're going to have to get rid of this business one way or the other. We may do a management buyout. We may sell it to someone, but either way, we won't be coming to Roseland, New Jersey in a year. I appreciated him saying that. I remember thinking, what an idiot I must be. I followed this path blindly without doing my diligence. And it was a different world. You couldn't just go on the internet and see what was going on.
Yeah.
But, it was the best move I ever made. So I always tell people, I speak to students at Wharton all the time, and they say, I'm really struggling with this decision and this decision. And I didn't know it at the time. But the reason I went, when I look back, I went to Prove because I just believed, after I met with Renee and Steve, that these people were great people. They were going to do some great things. And, I just learned the lesson. You follow great people, surround yourself with great people. I tell my kids all the time, the most important thing to do in life, whether it's socially or professionally, surround yourself with people that you're going to be proud of, that are going to be, you're going to respect, that you feel like you have a shared value system. And so I went to Prue and I thought, I really got to see this turnaround. I got in the mix. I saw how a business like that, a complex business, really works. We were losing $1 billion a year. We got the business back to break even. We sold it to Aetna. My job was to track these initiatives and make sure we were really going to see the results and the savings. We would say we contracted or we put in a initiative, were we really going to get the impact? And I saw the value of, moving this enterprise, how hard it was, but the leadership and the prioritization that those folks brought. And there was just such a great team there, people like Pat Garrity and Dan Cave and, John Gavris, people I still work with and are in touch with, that a lot of talent there. So it was a great experience there.
Great. Now, what was the Internet Healthcare Group?
So Internet Healthcare Group, we sell Pru to Aetna. And Steve Schulman.
Did you say, I remember at the time, Aetna would say, like, Aetna, glad I met you. Was that your
Yeah.
feeling as well?
I don't know if that was my feeling.
Yeah.
We were happy to sell it. We knew
Yeah.
that was gonna, someone was gonna buy it. And it was an interesting experience because I got to be part of the team that they were doing diligence on. And there was a few of us. I remember the first meeting with Aetna. There were 5 of us in a little hotel room in Avon. And it was right before Thanksgiving, and it was the CEO of both of these companies. And, I was carrying the pail, and I had the numbers, and I was in the room, and I was in the room where it happened, I guess, from Hamilton. There was a handful of us, and 3 weeks later, Aetna had bought Prudential. It was pretty wild. So Internet Healthcare Group. So this is 99, and the internet and healthcare are taking off, and how are we going to use these things together? And so Steve Schulman and Renee Lear said, we're going to start this business with 4 people. Do you want to do it? We're going to raise money. We're going to be entrepreneurs, and we're going to back and write some business plans, but also back some existing internet healthcare businesses. So we did. We raised $150 million. Our biggest backer was Internet Capital Group, which listeners may not remember, but they were like valued at more than GE, $30 billion. And CMGI and Internet Capital Group were the 2 big publicly traded, these internet venture arms holding companies. And so we got our money, a lot of our money from them and a few other strategics, and we started making investments. Great experience for me. My job was really to incubate and start businesses from scratch. I realized just how hard and incredibly hard that was. Got the right 3 business plans, one of which didn't go anywhere, one of which became One Digital, which is now a multi-billion-dollar business, doing small group health insurance. And then the other one was Luminos, which was one of the first consumer-driven health plans that was bought by WellPoint, Anthem. And so great experience. Again, I saw how hard it was to go from a business plan ideation to actually launching the business. And that wasn't my role. My role was, to help with some of that planning. We brought in good CEOs to do that. But I realized, again, I had a tremendous admiration for the entrepreneurs that did these roll-ups and really started from, things from nothing, really.
I remember a few years after that, hearing the selective memories of venture capitalists, and they, it's like maybe 2003 or so when you say, now, how'd you do during the, .coms? Well, we weren't really involved in that, or, we did this or that and the other, but at least in your telling, 2 out of 3, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I'm gonna tell you that much.
2 out of 3 ain't bad. And again, Luminos was bought for hundreds of millions of dollars from Anthem and WellPoint, and One Digital, again, has changed hands many times. We sold it far too early, but its valuation's been over $1 billion. I'm proud to have been a part of that at the beginning. So that was great.
Now, speaking about being an explorer, Magellan, I'll always love that name. So Magellan, what is that, and what'd you do there?
So when I came to Magellan, it was coming out of bankruptcy. They had hired, they knew about the turnaround team from Prudential, and they needed a turnaround team at Magellan. They hired a bunch of the folks from Pru. It was a fascinating experience because, again, people don't always get the subtleties here, but it was a bankrupt company that was making a reasonable amount of money because it just had so much debt. It had acquired all these blues oriented behavioral health plans. and they just couldn't get the synergies out. They couldn't get the EBITDA out, but they all had positive EBITDA. So we went there. The company was going through bankruptcy. The first year out of bankruptcy, the plan was that it would do $140 million of EBITDA and start paying off debt. Great news. We put all these initiatives in place. After the first year, we're doing $240 million. So we kill it. And the company goes public. The stock is doing well. And, we're feeling pretty good about life. And then all of a sudden, Wall Street came and said, that's great, but behavioral, again, the world keeps changing. Behavioral was considered a dying business at that point. Why would anyone want to get into behavioral health? It had been managed down, by bringing on some innovative drugs. And it was defined a little differently than it is today. Obviously, the student health piece isn't there. Some of the alcohol and drug addiction isn't there. It was just a different world. But we were told we need to really diversify out of behavioral health. So after my first job there, which was really interesting, my first job there was to run one of the P&Ls for behavioral health, which was all these Blues customers. And I'm 33 years old. I never had a direct report. I never had a customer. And now all of a sudden I've got, 20 Blues plans as customers, and I've got to retain them when they know we're going through bankruptcy. Insourcing was the big threat. And just managing people that were looking at me like, who is this guy that's 15, 20 years younger than me? Why should I trust him? And I would never have been given that opportunity if it wasn't for people like Steve and Renee to have faith in me. And so ran that P&L for a couple of years, again, through that turnaround. But after that first 18 months or so, it was obvious that we were way ahead of schedule, and the pressure was diversify out. So I was asked by Schulman to design a growth office so that we could grow out of our problems. We were getting there because we were managing costs down, and it was a very well operated business. Knew every cost of care, where every dollar was, how to operate efficiently. Wasn't always the best at customization, but they really knew how to build those widgets as effectively as possible. And so we had to think about how to get out of that box. So I was asked to think through what that might look like. And we talked to consultants who could do the strategy part. We talked to bankers who could do the M&A part. We talked to salespeople. And no matter who we presented, there was weaknesses. And finally, Steve said, I know the answer. You're going to be my chief growth officer, which was pretty exciting. I got to do sales. I got to do strategy, product, M&A, anything that led to growth. And it was a company that hadn't even thought about growth in a long time because of the pending bankruptcy. And so got to do that, worked on revitalizing the public sector business, which became a big grower. We sold about $1 billion of new business over the coming couple of years, with Russ Petrella leading that business unit and me getting to partner with him on that. So I got to be on the sales front. But then on the M&A front, we looked at businesses that we really thought we could leverage the infrastructure at Magellan, but in a space that was really growing. We bought two businesses. One was iCore Specialty Pharmaceuticals, and one was National Imaging Associates, managing advanced imaging, which actually just traded hands from Centene to Evolent. Over the last quarter. And so we're doing these M&A deals. The market is interested in these deals. We're public, and we're not growing after the deals. So we do the NIA deal, and the idea was we were going to take risk. We were going to expand the value prop. And the CEO said, I just don't believe in the vision. Said, I wish you had told me that before we bought your company.
Sure.
But, Renee and Steve came to me and they said, you have to grow this. You're going to have to be the CEO. I said, I'm not sure I want to be the CEO. And they said, we're really not asking, we're telling. This is the right thing to do. And we're not going to buy anything else now anyway, until we show we can grow this business. It was a $40 million revenue business doing $8 million of EBITDA. It had been around for a while. And we quickly pivoted to a business that expanded the value proposition. In the past, it had just done prior prior auths. We built networks. We did site of service steerage. I saw the impact that had for the first time in my life. That was massive to see how much money you could save by taking the same scan, just taking it from the hospital into a freestanding unit. Put in claims edits. And by doing all those things, we've expanded the pie so much, and we could start taking capitation. We had the balance sheet to do it. So we did. And within 18 months, we had launched this new risk-taking NIA, and we went from 40 of revenue to 400 of revenue and 8 of EBITDA to 40 of EBITDA, and the stock was in its 40s. And, life was good. And, frankly, I figured I would stay at Magellan for a long time.
Get your gold watch.
And get my gold watch. And I was kind of in that succession line for CEO. I was much younger than the 3 people in front of me. I was the 4th on the totem pole. And I thought, this is probably what I'm going to do for the next 15 or 20 years.
But no.
But things change, right? So Steve decides to leave Magellan, and Renee steps up to be CEO. And I said, is this my chance to be president? And, the idea was I was too young. And, maybe I was. Who knows? But at the same time, I Steve had offered me the chance he had gone into private equity and said, would you like to think about running your own company for the first time, a standalone business, and introduced me to the concept of running Carecentrics. This is in 2008.
Yeah.
And it was a $300 million business, still part of Gentiva. Water Street was spinning it off, and took the challenge, and it was really exciting. We had to change the team, change the value prop. The value was so focused on the administrative savings you could have by outsourcing DME and home health and infusions, as opposed to the cost of care savings you could have. First, the direct savings you could have by reducing unit cost, et cetera. But then ultimately, the bigger impact you could have by really keeping people safe in the home and preventing readmissions. And that was the vision, was, hey, home is going to be a big space, big site of service. If we can own the home, if we have nurses that we can get a nurse into the home within 48 hours anywhere in the US, think of the incredible things we can do with that business. And again, brought in a new team, sharpened up the value prop, grew the business from 300 million to $1 billion, did a transaction where Summit took over, and stayed on for about 18 months after that transaction. And now I was 44.
Yeah.
And I had young kids. And, I just had been on the road just about every week of the last, handful of years there. And I just said, again, goes back to my background. I don't need that much, I'm happy with raising my kids and being close to home and not being on the road. And I said, I'm going to leave, Carecentrics. I gave them a big long notice, and they successfully got John, which worked out really well in John's reign. And I just said, I'm going to step back, and I got on a bunch of boards. Originally, didn't even know if that was planned. I wasn't sure what I would do. I was 44. I didn't know if I'd get on a lot of boards, to be honest. But I was approached originally by Ares saying, would you be the chairman of 2 women's health companies for us, Unified Women's Care and OB Hospitalist Group? Took that role in 2014, became the chairman of ELAP Services, which is now Imagine 360. Those 3 companies have all grown phenomenally well. Was really enjoyed my role with all 3 of them. They all got great exits. And I was on the Beacon Options board, so got back into behavior a little bit with Bain. And I was on the Healthmap board all the way back since 2014. So it had been 8 years, and liked what they were doing. One of the guys at Healthmap, Joe Vadamadam, the founder, one of the co-founders, him and Drew Wall, has someone from Carecentrics that I had mentored, and he had asked me to join the board. And it was an interesting time, because now, fast forward to 2020, and here we are, it's COVID's hitting, and the business is starting to take off. And, they needed to bring in all these executives to help scale the business, and asked me, would I consider doing that? And I thought, no, why would I?
Yeah.
I've been out of the game for a while. I'm not
Yeah.
sure that that's what I'm going to do. But it was an interesting time. UPM and OBHG had sold. ELAP had done a transaction. Beacon had done a transaction. My dance card was a bit empty.
Yeah.
COVID all of a sudden made everybody just a little more cooped in with a little more time on their hands. The kids that I had left so I can spend more time with were now older.
Yeah.
And
And now
so
they're ready for dad to get out of the house. I have a feeling they orchestrated this.
they might have.
Yeah.
So, I think everyone was ready for dad to get out of the house, including dad. And it was interesting because, again, the first reaction I had was, I'm in Hartford, Connecticut.
Yeah.
Can't really run the business. It's in Tampa. And they said, no one's going in anywhere. Everything's virtual now. This is the summer of 2020. Why don't you come on board and decide to do it? And to me, there were really three reasons. And all three, I would have had to check all three boxes. It needed to be a business that would have significant impact on members' health.
Yeah.
I wanted to do good. The second is I wanted to have a chance to work with great people and either go to a place that had great people or be able to bring that team together that I wanted to work with. And Healthmap had both. I really liked the people that was there, but they said to me, we have a blank slate. We're going to grow fast. You can bring in the executive team you want. And then I needed that growth. I got intoxicated by the growth at NIA and Carecentrics. Just needed to feel again like there was an opportunity to grow as opposed to a turnaround. And I'm glad I did.
So why the focus on, kidney care? You talk about Healthmap, you could be mapping anything, but like why kidney, and why is that so important in terms of impact, and why so much growth?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, the roots of Healthmap were not specifically on kidney.
Yeah.
What Healthmap was built for was really taking in disparate data sets from different areas and then taking claims, pharmacy data, lab values, EMR data, and putting them in a longitudinal database that you could provide that data back to whoever the users were. And at the time, health plans and systems couldn't do that very well.
Right.
So that's what this company did. And then over time, they got asked to build algorithms and build the systems for a number of interesting companies, and they did that. And we eventually got to the point where we said, you got to pick a space that you think is compelling. What do you think is compelling? They brought up kidney. And we did a lot of research on kidney. Kidney had come up a lot at Carecentrics as the home. Could you use the home for dialysis? And we had health plans asking us about that. The truth is, when you start looking at, and you asked about dialysis at the beginning of you mentioned dialysis at the beginning of the call. When you look at CKD, it's so much bigger than dialysis. And you asked, why is it so much of a focus? So the way we think of ourselves is CKD stage 3 to ESRD.
Yeah.
If you think of that,
so you got to slow down for a second. So chronic kidney disease.
Chronic kidney disease. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
ESRD, end stage renal disease.
Yeah.
And then there's stages, and it's a funnel. When you've got unfortunately, the ESRD is the smallest population. I guess that's a good thing, but it's a tough point to end and get to. But then there's 5s that feed into the ESRD, and then the 4s feed into the 5s and the 3s and so on. And what you find is health plans and systems naturally think about the cost of dialysis. It's so much per unit and per member that the focus all goes to running to solve the dialysis unit cost issue.
Yeah.
There's no easy answers there. And it's also just scratching the surface. So when we define it as stage 3 all the way to ESRD, 80% of the members that we're going to feel are in that population eligible are going to be 3s.
Yeah. Got it.
Stage 3s. Only about 6% of those members are ESRD members, are getting dialysis. So the real answer isn't to try to get a few percentages out of the dialysis spend. Dialysis spend is like 9% of this total population spent. If you get 1% out, you're really not making a dent, or 5%. By the way, the health plans don't have a lot of leverage over the duopoly. So, that's usually a losing battle anyway. So what we said is, you got to go upstream. You got to prevent folks from getting the ESRD in the first place.
Yeah.
And you got to get them when they're early, like everything in healthcare. If you detect cancer early, if you detect heart disease early, if you detect kidney early, that's when you can have an impact. So why is that so hard? The reason it's so hard is because only 20% of stage 3s and 50% of stage 4s are seeing a nephrologist.
Yeah.
So you can't just go to the nephrologist and say, show me these members. Most of these members that are stage 3 in particular, their primary diagnosis in their mind is diabetes or hypertension.
Yeah.
It's really not the underlying kidney disease. Unfortunately, they're being seen by the PCPs, some of which are totally capable of managing this population, and a lot of them just need some help. It's complex, and it's not something they see every day. And so we come in. Let me stop before I say we come in. So that's why it's such a big issue now.
Yeah.
You got to go upstream, but to go upstream and do it well, you can't work with the nephrologists, which are smaller in number in the community. You got to work with the PCPs. Now, one of the strategies everyone does, including us, is to try to get people into nephrologists more frequently. The problem with that is the nephrologists are already overwhelmed and at capacity. Right. So the first thing you need in any solution here is you need to work with other providers who can provide care to these folks, is first thing. Second, you don't want to narrow the population of nephrologists that you're working with, right? You don't want to say, I want to steer everyone to one nephrology group over another. Frankly, with everybody in the network, there's still not enough capacity for nephrologists. So you really need to work with the PCPs well to be successful with the 3s and the 4s. The other thing you need to do is it drastically increases the population you're going to touch. It also drastically increases the number of providers you have to impact. And so you really need good systems to do this at scale.
Yeah.
And that's what we do. We take in tons of data on these members, claims data, pharmacy data, lab data. We have a system that once it takes in all those data, it puts together the optimal care plan for that member. And then it looks at, well, everything we know about that person, what is missing from the optimal care plan, when in reality, what are the care gaps? And then we just basically have the logic built in to say, prioritize those care gaps. If we could close gap 1, which one would we close? And we have an army then of nurses that both interface with the providers and with the members to close the care gaps.
Got it. So it's a very interesting market. So first of all, as you say, it's high impact on the patient and all that, but just from a sort of even not looking at that element of it. So you mentioned the duopoly, which is that I'll say it so you don't have to, so that those that run the dialysis clinics make an absolute fortune, and they do it at the expense of the commercial health plans before Medicare takes over. And it is so outrageous, and the tactics are quite something. We'll just say that. And so it actually has a positive effect that this is actually important enough for the health plans, because they hate this and they don't have a way to deal with it, right? So, and then upstream, that's good to work with the patients before they're sick and they kind of crash into dialysis, which is a term I've heard Healthmap talk about. It's interesting what you say about sort of getting people to nephrologists and out of primary care, or at least helping primary care with that, because if I think about the U.S. healthcare system, first of all, nobody else has that type of dialysis clinic in other countries. But also, usually we hear about, well, we have such, there's an oversupply of specialists, and there's not enough primary care. So here we're saying, well, there's not enough, nephrologists who are the specialists. Maybe part of the problem is also nobody knows a nephrologist is actually, deals with the kidney. You might have to be pretty well educated to know that. But how does this sort of, relationship between primary care and specialty, how does that influence what you do?
Yeah, so I think there's two things. One is, it's interesting because you got 3 specialists often in the picture. You've got the nephrologist, you've got the endocrinologist, and you've got the cardiologist and the PCP. So you need some quarterbacking there. What's fascinating is, it's such an important specialty, but it just doesn't draw enough historically. And when you talk to nephrologists, what they say is part of that is due to the duopoly. Right. They feel like they've created a lot of value, the nephrologists, in keeping people healthy, keeping them out of the hospital, et cetera. The value-based care hasn't really hit until very recently to give them a piece of that upside.
Right.
And I think what we're doing, and certainly others in the industry and CMS is doing, is trying to make sure that nephrologists that do great work are compensated for that great work.
Yeah.
They look around and they see the duopoly making the kind of money that they've made.
Yeah.
And there's resentment there. That said, the dynamic has to be, the nephrologists are, first of all, one thing I'd say that we're very proud of in our program, we're not a managed care program forced upon any provider.
Yeah.
Every provider has to opt into our program. And so that means we have to have a value prop for them. And as you know, providers are extremely busy. So if it's got to be a strong value prop to get their attention. The PCPs, again, they want help with this complex membership, but you've got to do it in a way that's systematic. They don't want, brochures about you should check on this once in a while for your members, or you've got to say that David's coming in for an appointment. We see that he's on this drug and this drug should be changed. Or, by the way, David is on the right drug, but he isn't refilling it. And therefore, we think that there's a likelihood that there could be a problem down the line. Or, by the way, this person hasn't had a new lab test in quite a while. And so it has to be very specific. It has to be very actionable. But the PCPs and we work with them, people say, are you integrated into the EMR? We do whatever the PCP wants.
Yeah.
So sometimes we do that. Sometimes we give them an electronic report. Sometimes we hand them paper. Sometimes we fax, whatever they want. We've got to be in their natural course of workflow. And so we do that, and we do that extremely well. And then on the the nephrologist side, they want to know that when their member isn't in front of them, that member is being seen, that they're being tracked, that they're being touched upon. They also don't have the time for education, which is a lot of what's going on with this population. Is a lot of questions about the fear of dialysis and what they should be doing. And so we have a nurse available for that member and take that burden off of the provider's hands, hopefully giving them more capacity.
So who invests in this company? Because you're growing fast, you're taking in capital. Like who sees the value proposition on this from the investment side?
Yeah, so we have PE money around the table. Winrose has been a great partner for us. Diamond Castle, which is a group that now really runs Rothschild's healthcare fund, are part of what we're doing. They were in quite early. And we have also gotten funding more recently from two of our larger customers, Guidewell, the parent of Florida Blue, and Triple
Getting back
S.
to Pat Garrity that you mentioned early on in your discussion.
Absolutely, who are also investors in Carecentrics. And so another lesson is just, you never know where you're going to end up being good to your customers, right? Most of my customers I've served before, and no matter what happened, to do it in the right way and serve yourself well, is the right way to conduct yourself. And I've found that, a lot of our pipeline and a lot of our customers, they're coming to us because me and my team, which we brought together a lot of us that had worked together in the past at various places. We have a reputation for delivering for our customers, and we know it's important. So Highmark also invested. So we have Highmark and Guidewell, and we have Cigna as a customer, and Molina as a customer. And we have a big pipeline, so we're feeling good.
Yeah. So what are the big challenges other than managing all the growth, or is that the main one?
So there's a couple challenges. One, we did grow 6x over the last last 2 years. So that is it's a stressor on the systems, et cetera. And we've done all that, and we've got that business live. The other thing I'd say is it's a stressor. Again, think about where we were when this business was really ramping, right during the middle of COVID, when the labor market was a very different place. Trying to operate in a virtual world, and we've increased our employee count from 60 to nearly 500. And get great talent hasn't, is always a challenge you have to work on. I'd say one of the biggest challenges I face every day as a CEO is how do you build a culture in that virtual workforce?
Yeah.
And we've done a lot to do that. We see that really headed in the right direction. I think business-wise, the challenge is, and we have competitors, so we've got to stay out in front of that. We've got to differentiate ourselves. I think we've done a nice job on that. I would also say one of the things that's a competitive threat, which is interesting, is we haven't talked about this, there's some nephrology roll-ups that are happening here. And on the one hand, again, we need all the nephrologists work. I don't want to make it sound like we're working just with PCPs. We're working absolutely with nephrologists. And so we want to make sure that we're continuing to work with all the nephrologists that can be out there.
Right.
And so having folks see us as partners, not competitors, is important. And we think we've positioned ourselves that way. We have competitors of ours that have actually, like, they've signed up to work with one nephrology group over another.
Yeah.
Our view is that's a tough position to be in. You're
Right.
limiting the amount of capacity again in that specialty. So playing the Switzerland is where we are. That's also a challenge the other way. So that's going to be an interesting to see how that all plays out.
So Eric, final question, probably unrelated, but maybe you'll relate it some way, is have you had a chance to read any books lately or in the more distant past? Anything you would recommend?
Yeah, two books that were kind of interesting to me. So the first one, my kids are now college age. My daughter goes to Northwestern. My son goes to Vanderbilt. My daughter was walking around with a book called Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely.
Yeah.
And you as an economics student who still loves this stuff, you learn that everyone's going to have this rational behavior. And the book basically says, look at all these examples where the world is just irrational economically, and let's talk about why that might be, and let's go through a bunch of examples. And it just really hit home. I found it just really a fun read, and something that just took down a lot of preconceived notions I had on economics. I really enjoyed. The second one is a totally different subject. My nephew David Scheimer wrote a book called Rigged, which was just an amazing book. This book is about espionage, of Russian espionage and US espionage through the years. And it sort of came to importance when, there was a lot going on in the political world with how was Russia involved in our elections, et cetera. But what he shows is over the last 100 years, not only has Russia meddled in a lot of our elections, but we've certainly meddled in a lot of theirs. And in a lot of elections in that happen across the world, the kind of influence that both countries have had. What was fascinating was, I'm very proud of my nephew. He's in his 20s. The amount of CIA agents and former heads of state and FBI agents and et cetera, that were willing to sit down and talk to him and give him some of these stories. And if you like spy stuff, if you like that kind of stuff, read the book. It's pretty interesting.
Outstanding. Well, Eric Reimer, CEO of Healthmap Solutions, it's been a pleasure having you today on the HealthBiz podcast.
It's been a pleasure to be here.
You've been listening to the HealthBiz podcast with me, David Williams, president of Health Business Group. I conduct in-depth interviews with leaders in healthcare business and policy. If you like what you hear, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite service. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe on your second and third favorite services as well. There's more good stuff to come, and you won't want to miss an episode. If your organization is seeking strategy consulting services in healthcare, check out our website, healthbusinessgroup.com.